In 2003, I got my first Bethesda game. I had seen a review for it on Toonami, which was a weekday afternoon/early evening block of anime on Cartoon Network in the United States. I'd recently got the original Xbox when I watched this review, and the way the host described it, it seemed like an absolutely massive world to explore and enjoy. So I went down to my local GameStop, picked up a copy, and started to play. It took me a moment to get the controls and the feel for the game, but once I stepped off that boat, I realized just what kind of game this was. It was a true open-world experience, where I could go anywhere, do anything, and engage in the rich background and characters I encountered. Despite this, I never actually finished the game. It wasn't for a lack of trying, though. I didn't know where to go once I reached the closest city, so after 20 hours of wandering around the starting area, I kinda stopped playing. It was over a decade later when I told my Bethesda superfan of a wife this story that I learned that I didn't pay attention to dialogue about killing rats in a cellar, which would have progressed the plot. Since then, she's never stopped teasing me about it, and I'm pretty sure she's going to tell that story to our children as a cautionary tale about reading comprehension. I tell this story because when I booted up Starfield for the first time, it felt just like that moment of stepping off the ship into the new world of Morrowind. And the more I played it, the more I felt the same feeling of being swept up in a new world of adventure. And yes, before you ask, I did pay attention to the NPC dialogue this time. My name is Paul Shelley, and welcome to TheAstroHistorian. This is a channel dedicated to exploring and explaining the lore of sci-fi and space universes and discussing their impact. Today we'll be doing a very special review video for Starfield, which is releasing into early access on August 31st and a full release on September 6th. Bethesda reached out to give me a review copy of the game a few weeks back, and as someone who has never had one of these before, I was the proverbial dog that got the car. Of course, I wanted to play Starfield early, but I've never done a review of a game before. So I came up with a two-video approach. To keep the theme of this channel, sci-fi and space lore, this is a mostly spoiler-free review on the lore and background of the universe. I say mostly because I will give some spoilers for the tutorial mission, but nothing about the main quest focus of the game. I also have another more technical and gameplay-focused review on my other more game-focused channel, the Astropub. So for the full experience, be sure to watch that video after you watch this. Last thing before I start, I will say that at the time of me writing this script, I've played about 23 hours of the game and have not even finished the main story once. Though I haven't just been doing side missions either, so take this as an initial review and not an in-depth analysis video. Sticking with the main bread and butter of this channel, this video is focusing on reviewing the lore and background of the game. More specifically, how the game feels in terms of its story's universe. The quick summary is, Starfield is not only very deep, but also incredibly well executed in this regard. Like most Bethesda games, you pick up the majority of the background information from the people around you, random encounters, and books or other documents. However, Starfield feels like a refinement and an expansion of that formula. Just in the first tutorial mission alone, you'll pick up information about the United Colonies, the Freestar Collective, the Colony War, and the brutal nature of the Crimson Fleet. At one point, you will hear what sounds like a recording playing of a scientist being ripped to shreds by an alien monster, and quickly realize that it isn't some recording you accidentally tripped, as you hear a gang of Crimson Fleet pirates laughing at this poor scientist's situation and asking to replay the entire audio log again. That's not all. You can also access computer records of the facility you're in and find out who built it, why they built it, and what happened. None of this matters to the plot as a whole, but it does do some rich world building. I know this is standard for most open world games, especially Bethesda open world games, but it's really well done in Starfield. Just about any handcrafted location is filled to the brim with little information about the universe, factions, and the goings-on of the galaxy around you. You can learn a lot by just listening to scripted events going on inside the cities, even interact with the NPCs after the conversation, and get involved in whatever is being discussed. And let me say, it's surprising just how many NPCs you meet that aren't just stock background characters, but ones with dialogue, backstories, and their own quests. To give an example, one event that happened was one of the first times I arrived at New Atlantis. When I started walking into the city, a gathering of about 4 people and a child were talking at just the bottom of the ramp from my ship. They were talking about barely surviving a raid by the cultists of House Varun. I let the event play out and talked with one of the adults after the fact and asked them about their experience, finding out that they had some combat experience in their younger days before becoming a scientist. I also learned about the Great Serpent and the Serpent's Crusade, a major conflict that had taken place early in humanity's history in space. This is just one encounter of between 15 and 20 I had in and around New Atlantis, and I honestly believe there are more storylines and quests to be had there. Another example is a random event, which had me investigate a distress call from a Freestar Collective private, which turned into a multiple-hour quest dealing with waves of spacers and ending in a last stand to protect a group of scientists. The amount of context and world building in that hour-plus side quest alone was more information than some games have in their entire story. Starfield does a great job of giving context to the universe around you without forcing exposition dumps. You don't have to learn more than you need to do your job, but if you do, you might be rewarded with better options or just a heads up on the threats you're about to face. This approach really makes you feel like you're just one space traveler in a living universe, which goes on with or without you getting involved. You aren't being hailed as the chosen one or the great hero, but just another traveler making their way through the verse. That's at least not from my experience from where I got before writing the review. However, if there is one critique, it's that the procedurally generated encounters created when you land on planets and areas that you don't have pre-placed locations, there is little to no world building present. You might be told to deal with some generic issue nearby from a scientist base, see some books, or see some set dressing for an old research base or robotics facility, but it's really no more than a randomly generated dungeon crawl. It's a minor issue, but does set the tone that once you get through all of the handcrafted content offered, it's more than likely all you'll get in terms of in-depth lore and background information. Still, I was learning new things after 20 hours into the game with no end in sight. To summarize, the game does a fantastic job of immersing you into its galaxy. You get a sense that you are in a living and breathing universe, which you are a part of. There are limits to how in-depth they go with this, but still it's an impressive amount of lore for a new IP. Now, if you want a more gameplay review of the game, check out the video in the top right from my other channel or the link in the description. The short version of that is, again, it's good, very Bethesda, but it does have some minor issues which surprisingly aren't related to bugs. I know, that sounds insane, but trust me, watch the video. I'd like to thank you for watching this video. If you want me to do more in-depth breakdowns of characters, factions, and other lore of Starfield, be sure to let me know in the comments below and leave a like on your way out. If you want to help the channel out with a few credits, be sure to join the Patreon or become a YouTube member like those on screen now. As always, remember, ex Historia ad Astra.